shave it.
No, I can never shave my hair. It's like source of my power.
It's beautiful. How long is it?
So long. I don't even know anymore.
I tried to sell mine.
Really?
Nobody wanted it.
Really? Why not?
Oh, they said they would give me like 300 tops, but I've been growing it out for I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
300 for that? No. I would have to shave it. Not worth it.
Hi everyone who is coming on to Periscope right now. For those of you who are new to us, we're going to start this interview, but a few things I'd like to say before we get going is if you have a question, please leave it to the end. We do have a Q&A, so just write it down and then we will get to, then you can ask it at the end. So we're not going to interrupt the interview for questions in the middle of. For those of you who love to write, please show me your feed and all these other demands. It's not going to happen. So if you've watched any of our other Periscopes, just stop asking. So I would like to first start with, I am Lucy Sweetkill, one half of La Maison de Rouge. And today I'm going to let her introduce herself. But when we do introductions, we like to hear your name, pronouns, any job titles, and self-identifying titles.
Okay, hi world. My name is Isabelle Kohn. Pronouns are she or they, whatever comes first to your mind. I'm a sex writer, a sex educator, a sex consultant, and also a lecturer. So what I do is I write about and I study sex and I talk about it with people. I'm also for hire. If you ever need somebody to talk to about your sex life, I'm more than happy to be that person for you. So you can contact me through my Instagram, and we can go from there. But yeah, mostly I'm a writer.
Cool.
And a fan of BDSM.
So I reached out to you because I read your article that you wrote that was on Harper Bazaar, right?
Yeah.
And what was the title of that article again?
It was Kinky Sex Can Be the Secret to Your Success.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I really loved that. And it, really focused on just like this empowerment and, like femdom in that empowerment and using that confidence as well as being open and exploring as well. So I want to, and I was really interested. I love those who write about sex. And so I reached out and I want to know, like, how did you, obviously you're a writer, but how did you kind of get into this avenue of writing about sex?
So, I never wanted to be a writer. I never had any sort of writerly aspirations. I have no journalistic training. But how it happened was I always wanted to be a doctor, and I was so fascinated with bodies and how they worked, and I loved diseases. Like, they just fascinated me endlessly. So I started studying the body, and I was doing integrative physiology in college, and also working at this little dinky clothing store in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm from. And one day, these people who had a magazine came in to see if we wanted to place an ad in the magazine, and they were called Rooster Magazine. And they said, hey, is your manager here? Like, we want to talk about advertising. And I wasn't the manager, but I was like, I'll talk to you about advertising. So we kind of became friends. And out of nowhere, I don't know what spawned me to do this. I was like, can I write for your magazine? And they were like, okay, sure.
Wow.
This was in maybe 2009, I think. So the first thing that I started doing was a sex column for them. And I don't know what made me do that, but I've always been a really sexual person with a lot of sexual interests, and I've always been so open about it. So I felt like it was what I wanted to talk about, and it was kind of my area of expertise. So I had this long-running column with them called Dear AB, and people would write in questions, and I would kind of sassily answer them, and I would kind of half make fun of them and half answer their questions, and it was this really great way to just break down the discomfort that people were having with sexuality by adding some humor and some levity into it. And I did that for years, like 7 years. I was Dear Evie, the sex columnist. And I started doing journalism after that. So I went into interviews and features, and I eventually left Rooster and started writing for Playboy, InStyle, Harper's Bazaar, Broadly.
And mostly all about sex.
Mostly. That's kind of my area of expertise. I like to write about everything, but if it's like there's a body involved, I'm like, let me write about the body.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it kind of has just developed into this freelance career that lets me explore my own sexuality through writing about it. So I don't know, I'm adventurous, I'm a Sagittarius, I like to explore, I like to try things. And I feel most expressive when I am experimenting sexually. So the way that I've chosen to do that is to investigate different facets of sexuality by writing about it. So yeah.
So then you started writing about sex randomly, and obviously did really well and had this column. But then what made you keep going down where you wanted to do sex education and counseling and all of that?
So I've always been a person who could just talk about this stuff. Some people have a situation where they don't talk about sex in their household, or they don't get an adequate level of sex education, and that kind of spurs them to discover sexuality. I don't know what happened to me, but at birth I was downloaded with this, like, I can talk about sex and study it card.
Yeah.
So it felt so natural, and that's what kind of clicked for me to do my column in the first place, was I could just talk about this stuff, and I could explore it, and I never had a judgment about it, and I've been very lucky in that I've been able to explore and talk about these things with my family without a lot of shame, with my friends. It came so openly for me, and so as I started, and I'm very lucky, by the way, that's not lost on me at all, the fact that was just something that felt innate, but people would be like, you helped me discover something, or I would realize that in doing some research for somebody, like, I could help them find something about themselves that really was useful to them. So it kind of led me into thinking, like, if this is my gift, if this is like my natural setting, I could use this to help people. And I really care about people feeling comfortable with their sexuality. And it makes me so happy to lead somebody in a direction where they could feel more in touch with themselves sensually too. It doesn't always have to be sexual.
Yeah.
So in that, I started working at the Pleasure Chest in LA, which is an education-based sex store, and I started teaching classes there. And then I realized you could get certified for being a sex educator, so I went and did that at SFSI in San Francisco. And now I'm kind of working on getting ready to go get like a master's degree in somatic psychotherapy, so I can help people work with their bodies and get in tune with their sexuality by combining what's going on up here with down here. So yeah.
That's really awesome.
Thanks.
You know, you kind of had this opportunity, you know, you were presented this opportunity, but you kind of went with that internal voice, you know. Mm-hmm. So would you say that, you know, you said that you kind of naturally were born as someone who was okay with, you know, your sexuality. Do you feel that also had to do with your support network too?
Yeah, I had a random support upbringing. Like, I had sex positive education in elementary school.
Wow.
And I have this one memory where my fourth grade teacher had all of the students sit around her, and she said, sex feels good a lot of the times if it's consensual and everybody wants to do it. It can be really fun. And that's a reason why people do it, but they also do it to have a baby sometimes. Sometimes it helps with getting people to be more intimate with each other. Sometimes it's good for your mental health. So she really conveyed the sense that, like, sex was more than reproductive, or sex was more than utilitarian. Like, it was expressive and could be pleasure-based if you wanted it to be, and everything felt safe enough. So that happened, and then she also empowered us to talk to our parents about sex. So I remember going home after that and asking my mom,
put your parents in the most uncomfortable position possible right now.
Well, I have this, like, you know, I'm from Boulder, Colorado, which for those who don't know is like a relatively liberal place.
Yeah, it's white liberal.
It's white liberal. It's actually not as white as it seems. There's actually a much bigger minority population there than it's given credit for, but it's not physically organized in a way that integrates everybody. So it misses the mark in that way for sure. I'm not really too psyched on them for that, but conversations of sexuality weren't repressed where I came from.
Awesome.
So I remember going home and asking my mom this incredibly awkward question, and I was like, "Mom, how many times did you and Dad have sex before you made me?" And she was like,
She's like, first off, this is like asking me to do so much math.
She was like, like a lot. And I was like, "How many?" And she was like, 27. And I was like, 27 times? Who are you? And she was like, "Well, it felt good." And so that was like another reinforcement for me that I was like, "Oh, I guess I can talk about this." And like today, my dad is a writer too. He's a fantastic writer, and he edits all my sex articles. And it's just, I don't know why it's not awkward. And like my grandma, I talked to my grandma about sex too. I think
that's really cute.
Yeah, it's so important to talk to your elders about sexuality because they have so much insight and so many things to say. So it had a lot to do with community. And then also, I did have a lot of experiences growing up where I was really shamed for this. I lost my virginity really early at 13. It was fantastic. I chose to do that. Congratulations. Right? So sometimes you can make those informed decisions at an early age, and it was a good experience, but I was ridiculed for it. My friend's dad called me out constantly for being like an early slut, made me feel horrible. He would ask me, "Why do you feel like you need to grow up so fast and you're so young?" And he would say that to me in front of like the whole family.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote some horrible shit about me like on the back of the bus. And at a certain point, like at 13 or 14, I was like, I like sex. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I literally don't care. So I would sit behind what that person wrote about me at the back of the bus just to be like, I own this. I don't care. Like,
it's really interesting. You look at, like, you know, you have your close support network, right? Your family, your immediate family. And then you have these external things that you kind of have to deal with, whether that's society or, like, you know, friends, family, friends, you know, that are not, and you may get that support in one area, and I think that's super essential. Like, that family network should be super supportive, because, which helps you deal with those non-supportive, you know, outer influences, right? That, you know, having your parents and having, like, the, you know, these people who are really close to you support you helps you sort of, like, not get broken down by, let's say, friends or friends' parents or society a little bit more, you know. But the influence that they have on your sexuality and feeling that shame, you know, can be really intense.
Absolutely, and that's why it's my utmost intention to be somebody who can be part of someone else's sex-positive community.
Yeah.
Because I'm so lucky that I grew up like that, I have to give it back to people.
Yeah.
I have to be the person that says, you can come to me with anything you want, and I won't judge you.
Yeah.
If it's consensual, if it's with, like, consenting adults, and it's not hurting somebody, I'm happy for you, and I'm here for you to figure out how to make it good for everyone involved, including yourself. Like, it's,
definitely.
I want to be the community that I had growing up for other people.
And also your teacher, like, that's a big thing for a teacher to do. Like, and teachers actually have a huge influence, and I know that my teachers at that grade level had a huge influence that I remember in my own mind some of the things I did with like my 3rd and 4th grade teacher that really pushed me to be the person I am today in a lot of ways. And like for her to be like bringing out that conversation kind of builds the necessary seeds to have like a really positive sex life, to be willing to have the conversation, to not feel shame about it, and then that leading into, because your teachers are like your surrogate parents at that age. You spend more time with them than anything else, and you know, in our schooling system, right? You spend how many hours with them? 5 days a week. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so to have those positive influences, like, you know, I could see how that helped create like more positivity for you to see sex in a very more positive way. Like, that's really amazing. That's a really awesome story. So then you kind of just were like, you know, you had this really good support network. Did you have partners that were really supportive in your sort of sexual exploration too?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I had some. I mean, like
Do
everybody.
do you think you chose people who sort of aligned with you? Okay.
Like you have an innate sense, typically, without words being spoken, without knowing somebody to the point where being completely verbally honest is possible. Sometimes you have a feeling about somebody, and it's important to listen to that intuition. My first couple of partners, we were young, and at that point we didn't know enough to be questionable or like ashamed about what we were doing. It was kind of, we were exploring anyway. But the person that I did like the first things with was very explorative, and like so was I, and we did a lot of things at a really young age that really helped like set the scene for the person that I would become. And I think I've had more vanilla relationships than relationships that were kinky or like super adventurous. But early on, it kind of drilled into my head that like sex can be non-penetrative. It can be emotional. It doesn't have to be like two people's genitals touching. Like we would just explore because we were young and we were doing that. So some people, yeah.
I think that's really awesome right there. I think that's a big part of kink and BDSM, is that it's not just about your genitals, and it's not about penetration, it's not about those things, you know, it's about tapping into your sexuality. Like, if those things were removed, like, would your sexuality disappear? No.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up.
Okay.
So, full disclosure, internet, I've been dealing with this bizarre issue of painful sex for, I don't know, like 9 to 10 months right now, and it makes it so like penetration is really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
the way where before I liked it a lot, like I was a penetration person, like it wasn't incidental to me. That was like the cherry on top for me and my body. But it's just not felt like it has. So I have turned to things like BDSM and impact play, and in particular like spanking, to kind of awaken that part of myself and get in touch with my erotic and perverted side without having a genital snatching. Even though like I try to do that, and sometimes I do, and it's great. Sometimes.
You're trying to awaken the other parts of your body, because our skin is all connected and it's all sensations. It's really just sensations.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know?
And a lot of the time, sex is like, the physical part's really important, but sometimes what you want is like the energy and the intimacy with somebody else. So when you're saying like, oh, I don't feel like I'm having enough sex, or like the sex that we're having is too boring or too vanilla, what you're saying is like, I'm not getting the connection with this person or with myself that I need. So sometimes it transcends beyond that, and that's what I love so much about BDSM, is it taps into everything that is beyond the physical, despite the fact that physical things are very prevalent, but they don't always have to be. Like,
Well, that's really amazing that you know, and thank you for sharing that, because this is something that I see a lot with a lot of the people I see, is something physically traumatic has happened to them, whether that's cancer, and they can't use their typical, like, you know, sexual organs the way they thought. And so, again, if it's removed, it doesn't mean your sex and sexuality disappears, you know?
No.
And teaching people to tap into the fact that, like, again, their biggest sex organ is their mind, and their whole body can be forms of sex and sexuality and sensations, like, that's the amazing thing.
You want to know something else interesting about that? So I've been studying senior sex a lot, and I just did another piece for Harper's Bazaar about senior sex. And
I think I posted about it because I think it's really, that subject is really amazing to me.
Right, and that's another situation in which, like, maybe your body isn't functioning like it used to when you're 70, 80.
Yeah.
It's not like your sex drive completely goes away or your parts don't completely work, but it's very true that they don't work the same as they have, usually. But seniors, and particularly a lot of seniors who are finding the sexual enlightenment on the internet, are finding that if they expand their definition of what sex means to them, and they go, it can be beyond penetration, it can be beyond oral sex or any sort of, like, again, genital touching, then I can continue to be a sexual and a sensual being until the day that I die.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of seniors today are saying, like, kissing counts as sex, holding hands, maybe just this, like, long, luscious process of slow touching in the absence of an erection or a lot of, like, vaginal lubrication or whatever. Just touching. Just intimacy. It's the exchange of intimacy. Even with themselves, like, sex is clearly, like, solo a lot of the times, and that's perfectly valid too, but, like, your body is a part of it, but it's also just about getting in touch with sex as a much broader thing than that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's, so before, did you consider yourself, like, a kinky person?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've always kind of considered yourself kinky. Like, in what kind of definition?
So when I was little, as we do, as we're wont to do, I had little, like, sexually explorative things with, like, my girlfriends, and just as many people do, I'm sure, many people that I've talked to, but, like, as I grew up, it dawned on me that not everybody else was doing that. And then as I got into, like, a teen, and I started dating people, and I started growing up, I realized that the things that I was into were a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more risque. I noticed that they didn't happen naturally as often as more vanilla sex. So I thought to myself, like, oh, okay, like, the things that I'm into, like, they're not terribly common. And, like,
to negotiate this.
Right. I was too young at the time to know, like, you could negotiate, and my partners were probably like...
Yeah, the idea of negotiation is a very, complex thing that we should teach more at a younger age, but it's something that we've reserved for a later age. Mm-hmm. But it's something that we actually do naturally at a young age. With children, we negotiate with them in, like, simple ways, Well, you're expected to do this, and how do you feel about that? And if you do this, then maybe this happens. We are already negotiating with children. We should just teach them about that negotiation and consent.
With other people.
With other people at a younger age.
Sexual.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be sexual, but to understand those concepts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So many of those kinky or those, like, BDSM-based concepts can be applied to any part of your life, whether it's improving your communication by negotiating,
which
or, like,
is what your article was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. a beautiful segue on a Monday evening. Whether it's it's negotiating with somebody and using those tactics to better yourself at work or in other spheres of your life, or it's the emotional trust building that can help you with your interpersonal skills and future relationships. Like, all of these kinky things can be so beneficial to you in so many ways, and you don't even have to be kinky to negotiate.
Yeah.
Or to ask what somebody's limits and boundaries are. Like, you don't need to be a freak. Like, you can be as vanilla as you want, and that's fine. But it's nice to learn from the BDSM world.
So, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of, like, do you consider yourself like a top, bottom, switch? Do you use any of those terminologies within your own, within your own life? And, and if you consider yourself kinky, are there certain kinks that you're willing to share that you're really into?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, full disclosure, while I am naturally very kinky and I'm like sexually omnipotent and I'm like, I could do anything and be with anybody, like, I haven't had much opportunity to explore like official kink in my relationships. So I don't have that much practice. I do more like research and study and writing and talking to other people a lot than I do in my own life. Not that I'm completely vanilla or what I do is completely vanilla, but I don't know if I've earned the right to have like a official kinky identity. That said, I would identify as a switch, but I have way more experience with submission.
Yeah.
I have had almost no dominant moments, even though I'd really like to. Like, in my body, I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm like 50-50, and I do this BDSM test things on the internet, and the first thing that comes up is, you're a switch. So I definitely have desires to control and be controlled, but I really love to submit. I love to be told what to do. I like to be useful. If I'm a sub, I'm a huge pleaser. Like, I like to be a good girl. Like, I want to do a good job so much, and I want to be useful but also used. So I'm really attracted to the idea of having kind of my humanity taken away from me, consensually, of course.
Yeah.
And just kind of be the most useful thing in whatever way that means. So I love restraints. I love struggling against things.
Yeah.
I love impact play. I love flogging, spanking.
So the thing is, you've done a lot more than you think.
I have stories.
Yeah.
I have tons of stories.
So you've definitely done a lot of things. Like, I think you're playing with submission and dominance in a lot of ways just very naturally when you interact with people. Flirting is part of that,
Yeah.
How you flirt sometimes will play those power dynamics. And that's definitely, I would say, definitely a big part of BDSM too, even with the idea of seduction and the idea of, just even normal day-to-day things can sort of intertwine in that world a lot too.
Absolutely.
What do you think you would want to do as a top? Like, would you want to try?
I'll tell you. I'm really interested in the mental aspects of kink, and so I'm really interested in like things like erotic hypnosis. So I would like to hypnotize somebody and kind of lead them on whatever fantasy they are most interested in, without necessarily touching them. And I would like to like really get them off with my words and like the scenario that I set while they're in this kind of like consensual, like a trance.
Yeah.
Also, I would love to play with like a slave. I would love to like boss somebody around and make them do things for me around the house. I would like to manipulate people mentally, like do some mindfuck stuff. And I love to blindfold. I love to tie up just as much as I love to do impact play. I like to give it too.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at spanking, I think, actually. So kind of everything.
Yeah.
I have a lot of things that I'm into. But mostly it's like exhibitionism and voyeurism, I think, is my favorite out of everything.
Yeah. it's funny because I am definitely not an exhibitionist. I'm definitely a voyeur.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it leads well to being a dominatrix because I don't necessarily like people watching me, but I like to do things and then step back and look at the things I've done.
I can completely relate to that.
So it's funny, and I know, and just be like, oh, look at these things I've done, compared to like, I'm definitely not an exhibitionist. Like, I've done scenes in public, but I don't really enjoy it unless it's very specific and with somebody I enjoy doing it with.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of people watching me, I don't get off on it. It actually like stresses me out.
Do you ever work with submissives who are exhibitionists and you can like put them in humiliating or like interesting scenarios?
I have a lot of subs who enjoy that exhibition, like public play, like discreet public play. They like sort of being shown either photos, maybe if somebody else is there watching. Like it's very, it's a combination of being an exhibitionist, but it's also a combination of maybe they like being humiliated.
Yeah.
And so to be humiliated, sometimes the depth is added when there's somebody else watching as well, seeing what's being had, not just you, because they're like, well, you did it to me, so obviously you find it amusing. But if somebody else is there who finds it amusing as well, then they're kind of like, and freak out a little. I think this is tilting. We're sinking, sorry.
Yeah, that validation that you get from other people watching you, and just like the vulnerability.
Would you say you're more into being an exhibitionist or a voyeur?
I'm sorry, I'm 50-50 right down the middle. At play parties, I tend to just watch. I have like a non-participant personality. Like if a lot of people are doing something,
I really like that term. Right? I have a non-participant personality.
Like I just like to watch other people do things that they like to do, but I don't necessarily want to do them. All of the time, and like, so when I go to play parties, I like to watch, but when I'm with my partner, I like to be an exhibitionist. So it's like one of those things where you tailor the thing.
Why this keeps going down? Something keeps moving on this. Sorry, people. This is going to be hilarious. I don't know why it keeps.
It's a sinkhole. It's a New York sinkhole.
Yeah, it's like a social media. Oh, there it is. I think that's why. There, let me see. Is that? I don't even know what it's doing. Sorry for this, like. I think I made it work.
My eyes are up here.
All right, I'm going to let it slowly sink its way on its own. So I'm just going to, I don't know what it's...
Do you have something to put under it?
I don't know why it's doing that, though. Sorry, peoples.
Brief intermission.
Yeah, as I figure out how to not make us go over... All right, I'm going to do that. If I lead it up... This is so funny.
By the way, I'm dressed like this because I'm going to a drag premiere after. This is not normal for me.
I'm going to leave it like this, and I think it'll be fine for a little bit. I'm just going to... Are we still going down? Oh, yeah, we are going
down with it.
I don't even know why it's doing that. All right, here we go. There. There you go. Because it's like pretty... I think it's this part. Tighten this even more. All right. There we go. I think I fixed it. All right, I'm gonna pretend I fixed it. Sorry. That was pretty funny. It's like we keep sinking. Okay, let's leave it at that, and then we'll figure it out later. So you're very. I like that. What you were saying about participation, because I think sometimes, like when I'm at a play party, I very much just watch.
Yeah.
Compared to participate. It's actually very rare that I participate.
Yeah.
I know. Of course, everybody always wants to see feet. So what? Okay. Okay, so then that leads me into, what do you think about the future of like BDSM and kink and alternative sexuality? Like, do you feel like it's going to continue to be get more mainstream? Do you think there's going to be a point where it can never be that mainstream? Like, what do you think is going to happen, or hope to happen, I guess, too?
So something that I see, so I work at the Pleasure Chest in LA, so all day long I interact with people who are exploring their kinky sides, or they're like, they saw something in a movie and they're like, hell, I want to try that too. So what I see increasingly is people more open to alternative sexualities, being queer, being genderqueer, being bisexual, and being kinky. Granted, I am working in West Hollywood, and that's a bubble. That's not necessarily representative of the entire country.
Yeah.
But research has found that more people are identifying as queer, more people are experimenting with kink, and I'm not to say if they're doing that in response to trends or because they just feel increasingly more comfortable exploring that parts of themselves, but I do see people going in that direction where their sexuality is becoming more versatile than it has been. And that also comes with age. Like, the older you get... The older you get, the more you feel comfortable exploring, and now that we have all of these avenues to talk about our explorations, we see more and more people talking about this. So I think the future is going to be more people open to it and trying it. Does that mean that they're doing it in the quote-unquote right way? Not necessarily. So we talk about BDSM as being safe, sane, and consensual, right?
Yeah.
I don't see a ton of the safe being accounted for. Safe means you know what you're getting into. You're aware of how to do something so that you're not hurting anybody physically or emotionally. But to a certain extent, that's a little concerning, and to a certain extent, that's okay, because if you have a consenting partner that you feel comfortable communicating with, BDSM and kink can be all about exploration, right? There's no right way to do something. If it feels good and it's okay with everybody and you've talked about it beforehand. Are you syncing again?
It's okay. We'll just keep going. We're definitely syncing again, but whatever. I'm going to start from up here and then see what happens. Okay.
So yeah, I think people will adapt, but I do see really interesting like tech sex things. Like I read an article today about a BDSM robot.
Yeah, the BDSM about like whether that's like will it like go against robotics? Is that what?
Yeah, that the Isaac Asimov one. Yeah.
Where it's like, will this go against robotics? Of being. I'm just gonna do that and let it. Okay, I think it's actually working. All right. Yeah. I think the sex robot and the sex, like those things are going to be really interesting to see what happens in the future, right?
Yeah. But part of the reason why I like BDSM is because even though you can have a BDSM robot, there's something so visceral about it, and it really requires you to be in the moment communicating with somebody, and it requires a mental presence and active listening and trust and empathy, and like to a certain extent I'm sure an AI could figure out those things, but not at the rate or with the amount of nuance or personal variation that you can person to person. So I like that BDSM could be technological, but it's also very human.
Yeah.
And it has to be safe, too.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about that, compared to maybe other types of things that, all the sex robots that are, all the sex AI stuff that's happening. I feel like BDSM is one of those things that is very human and too nuanced that I don't know if that would, like if that could be replicated in that sense. Yeah.
I don't know, because everyone has such a different personal experience, and the machine would have to know the meanings of somebody's life.
These are less pattern-based.
Yeah.
While AI works on patterns.
Exactly.
That would be very difficult. It's interesting.
Yes.
So we always like, before we open it up to, questions, and maybe some of you guys have questions, we always like to do a little fun question of your vices and virtues.
I have so many vices, I don't even know where to start. Will you give me an example of one of yours?
What are some main vices? Like, one of my vices, I have like simple vices and I have intense vices, One of my actual vices that is definitely something I have to be careful of is I love biting people, like people I care about, because I don't really want a stranger's skin in my mouth. That it gives me such pleasure to bite them and give them pain in that sense, and it's generally consensual, but it's one of those things where I definitely have had to especially with people I'm dating, have to stop myself from doing that, and then ask a little more, and then establish whether it's an ongoing thing.
Right.
And that sort of pain, but I also love scaring people. I like to hide behind things and scare them.
I love people like you.
Yeah,
I'm not scareable.
We'll see.
Try.
But I feel like that's sort of, something I love to do, but it's kind of naughty, And then you've got your general vices, I'm a total, potato chip person, type of thing.
I'm addicted to these corn chips called Have-A-Corn chips. Do you know what those are?
No, I don't think I've ever had them.
I can't believe we're talking about this, but they are these corn chips, and they have soy sauce on them and lime, and it's disgusting, but I eat them all the time. I spend all of
That's
my
your
money.
food vice.
It's fucking crazy. I can't stop. It's horrible. But I have a shameful vice.
All right, what's
very bad. So one of my pet peeves is over courtesy. When people, and I define that as when people do something nice for you to make themselves look good to themselves. Okay. So example, when you pull up to a stop sign and the person that gets there first lets you go, and they wave you forward, and they come on. You're like, no. You got here first. This is how it works, is you go. That's how driving works in general.
Yeah.
You don't need to
So you'll sit there.
Yeah, you don't need to martyr yourself. I can wait 10 milliseconds for the traffic system to do its job. So I'll intentionally fuck with people that are too nice to me. Or when people...
That's a definite vice, and it's awesome.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Or my other pet peeve is sometimes when you're passing somebody in a hall, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry. But there's no danger of colliding. It's not like you hit them. Yeah. It's not like you're nobody is interfering in each other's space, but they'll just apologize for existing as you pass each other. Yeah. So I'll be like, for what? And they'll be like, oh.
So I wonder if this is considered the same thing. I really hate when people are they have no spatial awareness. And so whether they're walking down the street in New York and they're on their phone or whatever, or they're walking really slow, or they stop in front of when you're going upstairs of a subway and they just stop right when, I will purposely knock into them.
Oh yeah, me too. And then I'll be
and not say anything. Or when someone says sorry to me because they have no spatial awareness. So I was having dinner at this bar, and the guy, it's a packed bar, everybody's right next to each other, and this guy's talking with his hands, right? And I'm like, first off, don't talk with your hands like that, and then just not aware. So he's turned like this to me, he's talking with his hand and keeps, and he's hits me, and he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I just will look at them. I won't be like, oh, it's okay. I won't give people that satisfaction, because it's not okay.
It's not
because
okay.
You should know you're in a packed New York restaurant sitting at a bar. don't wave your hands like this. Like, of course you're going to hit somebody.
You're just the kind of person I would like to be in a packed New York bar with.
So I just don't, so I'll just look at them. I won't be like, oh, it's okay.
What's your best bitch face?
Oh, I think I automatically always have bitch face, though. So how about a virtue?
I'm pathologically nice.
I think it's because you're from Boulder.
Oh, no. It's because, I don't know. It's because I don't know if anybody cares about astrology. I have, like, Cancer rising. I don't know. I'm just, like, the best part about me is that I am really non-judgmental of things. And that really extends to the way that people behave in certain settings where other people are really rude to them, like service or, like, taxi drivers or, like, I have to be really kind to people who do things for me, like bring me food, take me somewhere in a car. I don't think it's anybody's career aspiration to drive me from the Lower East Side to JFK. Yeah. So I want to be as like understanding and as kind to somebody as humanly possible. And I cannot stand when people are rude to servers or when they bitch at cab drivers. Like, I don't know where this dude's going. Like, he's doing, like, people do the best that they can. And I'm one of those people who, you know, I work in retail, like, half the time. So, like, I really understand what it's like to be in a position that's not your life goal. You're just doing that to survive. And you're just trying to help somebody. So, I don't know. I have to be nice to people like that.
That's a very good, you know, like, I've definitely believe in, like, you know, I used to work in retail for a long time too, like being very nice to like servers and things like that. But I am totally have no capacity for incompetence, and so whatever job you're doing, you should do it well or make an effort to do it well.
That's true.
Yeah. And sometimes in certain jobs, people just don't. They just don't do it, right? Where I'm like, okay, you're driving me and you have the GPS and it's telling you where to go, yet you're not following the GPS. So what is happening? You know, that's where I get really upset is when like everything is kind of working for you, but you're not doing that.
Well, that's, incompetence is way different than,
that's because that's where I'm like, that's when I lose my shit.
That's completely understandable. Yeah, do your best.
For those of you out there who want to ask questions on Periscope, because that's where we can kind of see it, feel free to ask questions. But can you let us know where people can follow you, find you, any projects that you're working on that people can follow, support, all of that? Definitely.
So I don't have a Twitter because I'm prehistoric, but you can find me on Instagram at Dear Ibby, which is DearIbby. And my other account, my personal account, is at A Bunch of Poop. You heard that correctly, folks. It's a bunch of poop. My website is isabellekohn.com. Do they have my name or should I spell it?
No, I have it on here, but you can spell it as well.
ISABELLEKOHN.com. IsabelleKohn.com. And I'm working on a lot of projects. One of them is a sex ed pop-up dinner called Eating Out, where my friend and I, she's a vegan raw chef, and we throw out these dinners where there's like an educational aspect and sometimes like a kinky performative aspect.
Is it in LA though?
It is in LA, but we can come to New York if you bring us to you. We're mobile.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Any other projects or anything else?
Look out for me on Harper's Bazaar, InStyle, Broadly, Playboy. I'm always writing. I always post my articles. But yeah, mostly it's writing right now, and then one day I'll become an erotic hypnotist and I'll hypnotize you into orgasm.
Well, that would be awesome. Hypnosis is very big right now too.
It is.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Isabelle, for being on our show.
Thank you.
And you said some really amazing, enlightening stuff that I thought was really great and hopefully beneficial for those of you out there watching. And sorry for our little technical difficulties, and now it's just our heads because I don't know how far this is going to fall. But join us every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast live. We interview different people who work in the sex-related sex industry. And we cover a lot of alternative sexuality and, of course, kink and BDSM. And we will see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
So.